right. Well, welcome back to the Rich Marriage Podcast with Jason and Jennifer Hall. We are so excited to be back with you again today. We have a juicy topic for y'all today. Married with children. Married with children. For those of you out there with kids, I'm sure that pushed a little button with you just even hearing that topic. Yeah, marriages, some people decide to do it differently. Some people decide to wait. Some people come into marriages with children, as we talked about blended families a little bit. But yes, today we're going to be talking about married with children and what does that look like in the scope of your rich marriage.
Oh, that's huge. Man, we've always had children. So, you know,
We were married with children.
yeah, we were always
Came into
married with
marriage.
children. I came with 2 children, but, man, it's hard. Like, to have a rich marriage, like I was thinking about that. Like, first of all, man, the financial obligation, the family obligation, my God, it's so heavy. Like, it's difficult now more than ever. I empathize with people with kids with marriage and our economy. It's much tougher. It's more expensive. It's harder to find good employment that's high pay. And even with that, you need 2 parent, but also you might have, different difficulties with blended families, maybe even, there's kids that come in, you have to build and cultivate those relationships. But, married with children is challenging because you still have to have a relationship with your kids, but you still have to have a relationship with your spouse. And that can be really, really hard because, most people have to work. You have kids to take care of. You have obligations. When we have a son with sports, oh my goodness, it consumes so much time. So where do you find the time to cultivate your relationship with your spouse? Like, man, I want you to start that off because I'm like, how in the world do we spend time together if, we have these kids, obligations, financials, we have jobs, businesses, podcasts, like how do you work it all out?
Yeah, first let me preface it by saying, children are a heritage from the Lord. I am so grateful for our babies. It is a true honor to be called mother by them, to parent them, to watch them grow and develop, and to be entrusted with their care is such a huge responsibility that I never take lightly. So let me preface it with that. Yes, it's hard, but it's also one of the most rewarding things, one of the most blessed things to be a parent. And so in the scope of marriage and rich marriage, the first thing that I think about is really two things, time management and boundaries. I think are two of the biggest things that you have to consider in being married with children while trying to build a rich marriage, right? As Jason said, kids can take up a lot of time. We have a son who is very heavily involved in athletics, and so his schedule is very heavy when it comes to the athletic side. So what does that look like for us? Again, is prioritizing our date nights, again, being non-negotiable, our time together, prioritizing that, as well as prioritizing them. You can do both. You can do
Yes.
both, a phrase that we say often. But yes, you can do both. So what does it look like? I really think, again, boundaries are huge when it comes to being married with children and making sure that there's no lack in any area as far as the marriage or with the kids, that you can be present with. We have multiple, so we have 5 total, which can sometimes be madness, but we love it and we make it work how it works for us. I think that's the other thing too, is really embracing your own unique family structure and your schedule. Even our schedules, we both work remotely, which is totally different than having to, or even another parent that may work in office. So for us, that was a part of our rich marriage blueprint, is that something that we wanted to be able to have that time and to be able to be present and have that flexibility, that this is a life that we never even dreamt that was possible for us. So,
It's interesting you say that, and I think about the modeling aspect of children in the home. They're going to look to your marriage. Our children look at our marriage as a rich marriage, they're going to determine what a successful marriage should be. I think about, when I grew up, I had two parents in the home initially, but there was a divorce that happened when I was about 10. And it was really, really hard. But I got to live in a home with my grandparents at one point, and they've been married over 60 years. And I got to see a lot of things that were very powerful and impactful. And I watched the way they treat each other. I watched the way they interacted and loved each other. And I learned a lot. And I was just a young kid, 11 years old, 12 years old, and all through my teenage years. And I was receiving the modeling of what a marriage should look like. And they had a Christ-centered marriage. And I looked at a lot of things. They were imperfect, but they were perfected in Christ. And so one thing, it was a funny story my grandfather told me one time, because I'm like, man, they got the perfect marriage, It was so funny, this story I got to share. My grandfather loved to walk, and I was like, man, this man is in good shape. He's older, he's walking around, And so he would go outside every evening, and he would take this long walk. And then he would get back home like, Granddad, I asked him one day, I said, why are you, walking so much? Like, are you trying to go for a triathlon or something, or a marathon? And he said, well, sometimes I need to break from your grandmother. I need to cool down. And I was like, oh, wow, okay, I get it now. So there was some trials and tribulations, I just ain't see them, So anyway, your kids are seeing things and understanding. I share all that to say, like, they're going to see some trials and tribulations. Like, one thing, Jennifer does, she's like, well, don't argue in front of the kids. But I'm like, sometimes I do it, I'm stubborn. But I'm like, they need to see some real too. They need to see that we have conflict. Now, healthy conflict,
Yeah.
healthy dialogue. But they need to see that we don't always agree. We don't always agree.
Don't. We're actually totally different. It's funny you say we've adopted. Jason and I take a lot of walks too. Yeah, I highly recommend it. We also take a lot of walks together, though, praise God, which has also been a huge blessing, and something that's really up-leveled our marriage is taking those walks together and even having those difficult conversations while you're walking. Huge. That was free. But yes, we do. We take lots of walks. But yeah, we do need to have those intense, sometimes conversations. I believe healthy dialogue in front of them is also a way that they're going to learn how to handle conflict. So I think that is key. That's something that we've grown in a lot and have had to shift. Jason and I are very different, by the way, y'all. We're opposite a lot in a lot of different ways. But thank God he's brought us together and allowed us to see that as a strength and not a weakness. And over time, sometimes we, bump heads here and there every once in a while. No, but we do. We thank him for how he's allowed us to see that that's a strength for us and not a weakness. There's so many different areas where he compliments me and I compliment him. Something we learned really early on is you don't complete somebody else. Yeah, you can't complete anybody else. That's not how we were created and designed to be. But what God does do is bring two people together to be able to complement each other. And that's what I feel like he's done so strongly with us. In the beginning, that was a source of tension sometimes, y'all, even just in little things. Jason puts the toilet paper on the roll the opposite way than I do. He folds the towels and puts them in the closet the opposite way than I do. A lot of different things. He's very courageous and a risk taker, and I'm very much a rule follower. But again, I thank God for how he's brought us together to be able to complement each other in that way. And I see that our kids get to see that, and they get to experience that on a daily basis, and how our differences are actually strengths and not weaknesses.
Yeah, that's huge. I think about our kids in regards as they're seeing these different things. A lot of times we see in our kids the different personalities in us, and it's a reflection of something that we need to change. So it's like, well, they're like that. And I'm like, oh, they're actually like me. So one thing that we discovered with our children, they have some attributes that we have. They have some persona, some character traits that are in us, and sometimes the very things that we don't like, we discover in our children, and it's like, well, wait a minute, yeah, it's in you too. I trust me, you have some attributes and some ways that your children are expressing that you don't like to see so it's challenging in those ways. There's some great rewards. I love to spend, one thing that I've done, try to spend some intentional time with each kid, or take them out to eat, take them to the movies, play, sports, whatever it might be that their interests are. It's not easy to do too. Some of the challenges in a marriage is, you don't have time for your kids. Maybe you don't have that much time. Maybe you have two jobs because you're just trying to pay the bills and survive, right? Survival mode. And it's very, very difficult. Unfortunately, in my early years, the teenagers had to experience that from me, because I was always at work, so I couldn't spend time with them. So what does it look like now is cultivating a new, fresh relationship in these latter years and finding out who they really are. It's never too late to get to know your children. Those relationships that you have, a lot of people say, well, I wasn't there when they were little. That's true. But guess what? It's not too late, right? To cultivate. It may look different, but it's a different relationship.
Yeah, it's a good point. I love that you said that. Yeah, Jason worked shift work rarely for the first several years of our marriage. So it looked very different. You weren't able to be as present, right? Not only shift work, but overnight. Which I don't know if any of you listening, if you have had to do that, it's challenging. It's very challenging during the day. You have to sleep, when the times that you are off, and just being that opposite schedule, just mentally, emotionally, it really affects you. And so things look totally different early on. But as Jason said, he's been able to be more present than ever. I think another thing to point out is I love seeing the differences in each child, as Jason said, according to what they like, coming into their world, right? And getting into their circle, into their bubble of what they enjoy, and seeing their different interests. And not only that, but their giftings, and being able to nurture them, and being able to put them in different environments and expose them to different things that are aligned with how God's designed them, even, has been something that I've actually enjoyed. They're all so different. All 5 of them are so different. But it's actually been a source of joy just seeing that, and really paying attention to that. And that's something that you've done so well as well over the last several years, just really getting into their bubble and really catering to what they enjoy and what they like, and being able to nurture that.
That's a good point. I personally, my heartbeat and my purpose in life, for my kids, I really want them to be able to live their purpose. I want them to be able to live their calling and why God and who God designed them to be. So I'm personally willing, and thank God for my wife as well. She is personally willing to invest whatever that takes, the time, the money, resources, the connections, whatever that takes. I want to see my kids live into why they were created, who they were created to be. And so I'm willing to put the money in, I'm willing to put the time in, I'm willing to cultivate the relationships, find out the right schools, colleges, programs, whatever it needs to be to get them with the people that they are designed to be with. And one thing that is very, very impactful that come out recently, the last few years especially, one example is our son that's a teenager that plays basketball. We were able to finally find, it took a long time, but God had placed a mentor in his life, another man that could really cultivate him, not only as a player on the court, but also pour spiritually into him and different things like that. There's going to be other influences that your kids are going to need, right? That beside you as the parent or the parents that are going to need, we all hear it takes a village. Yeah. It takes a village to raise kids. You're going to need other influences that you can trust outside of your home to pour and invest into your children. It's going to be critical to their development, their growth. It's going to be critical to their calling and whatever their career might be. So that's going to be extremely important, is to find out who those influences you can trust, whether it's family, friends, mentors, coaches. But that is an element that I'm committed to. Our son, our daughter, other daughter, like we put in our kids the opportunities that they need to thrive. And that's something I'm really passionate about. And I believe that purpose for their life, I want them to discover it now. I don't want them to have to wait like me. And, I've done everything under the sun to try to find out who I am. And so I want my kids to have an environment where they can discover who they are with no pressure and no worries.
Yeah, and just to give them the space to be able to dream as well, as Jason said, in the scope of, who they are, who God created them to be, in their gifts. But definitely being married with children can be challenging. It has different elements to it that you do not have when you don't have children. And just to encourage those who do not have children yet to enjoy that time and to maximize it, because it does make a difference in building your rich marriage when you have children.
Awesome. Well, this has been the Rich Marriage Podcast with Jason and Jennifer Hall. We thank y'all so much for tuning in. You can subscribe on YouTube and all our other platforms that we share the Rich Marriage Podcast. Thanks again. We've talked about children today. Man, this is a huge topic. We probably do future shows on that because it's going to take a lot more conversations, right? But God bless you. Thanks again for tuning in. See you next time.
Yeah.